My twin took my life over, so I took back everything. Publicly, sometimes the person who knows you best is the one who destroys you most completely. But what happens when the victim stops playing dead? Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, and stick around until the end, because this story proves that sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply telling the truth. My name is Sophie Wilsmith. I am 32 years old and I live in the rain-soaked city of Portland, Oregon. For most of my life, I believed that sharing a face with someone meant sharing a soul. I thought that being born minutes before my twin sister meant I was meant to protect her, guide her, be her constant companion through this messy, beautiful life. I was wrong about everything. The thing about identical twins is that everyone expects you to be the same person split in half. They expect matching personalities, matching dreams, matching destinies. What they don't tell you is that sometimes one half learns to devour the other so completely that by the time you realize what's happening, there's barely anything left of you to survey. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, or at least from the moment I should have seen the warning signs but was too blinded by sisterly love to recognize them. Aurelia and I were born on a December morning in 1991, with me arriving exactly 7 minutes before her. 7 minutes that my mother never let either of us forget. Sophie came first, she'd say with this wistful smile whenever anyone asked about us. She was always the responsible one, even in the womb. It should have been a compliment, but somehow it always felt like a burden. Like I'd been assigned a role I never auditioned for. We grew up in a sprawling Victorian house in the hills above the city, where our parents run a successful interior design firm called Blackwood and Associates. Our childhood was privileged in all the material ways that matter on paper. Private schools, family vacations to Europe, writing lessons, piano lessons, art classes. But privilege, I learned, doesn't protect you from the particular kind of emotional carnage that happens when one person systematically erases another. Aurelia was magnetic in a way I never was. Where I was thoughtful and deliberate, she was spontaneous and electric. Where I preferred books and quiet conversations, she commanded rooms effortlessly. Our parents adored us both, but there was something different in their eyes when they looked at her. A spark of delight, of surprise, as if she was constantly exceeding their expectations while I was simply meeting mine. Sophie is our steady one, Dad would say, ruffling my hair absently while his gaze followed Aurelia across the room. We never have to worry about Sophie. I took pride in that reliability, in being the twin who never caused problems, who never needed rescuing, who never made scenes. I thought it made me valuable. I didn't realize it was making me invisible. We went to Reed College together. Of course we did, because twins do everything together, right? I studied literature and creative writing, dreaming of becoming a novelist. Aurelia majored in business with a minor in psychology, claiming she wanted to understand what made people tick. I thought it was fascinating. I didn't know she was studying me like a lab rat. College was where I first started to notice the pattern, though I didn't have words for it then. Aurelia had this way of asking me about my ideas, my dreams, my plans, with such genuine interest. But I'd spill everything to her. She was my best friend, my confidant, my other half. When I told her about the novel, I was working on a psychological thriller about a woman who slowly realizes her entire life has been orchestrated by someone she trusts. She listened with rapt attention. "That's brilliant, Sophie," she'd said, curled up on my dorm room bed, her eyes bright with what I thought was sisterly pride. "You have such a dark imagination. I could never come up with something like that." 3 months later, she submitted a short story to the campus literary magazine with almost the identical plot. When confronted, she claimed it was in homage, that she'd been inspired by our late-night conversations and thought I'd be flattered. The story won the annual fiction prize. My novel remained unfinished, buried under the weight of feeling like my ideas no longer belonged to me. "You should be happy for me," she said when I tried to explain how betrayed I felt. "It's not like you were going to submit anything anyway. You never finish what you start." That was Aurelia's gift, the ability to make her thefts feel like favors. Her betrayals feel like tough love. She had this way of reframing reality so that my hurt feelings became my character flaws. My legitimate grievances became my inability to be supportive. After college, we both moved back to Portland. I got a job at a small independent bookstore called Chapter and Verse, working my way up to manager while I tried to write in my spare time. Aurelia joined our parents' firm as a junior designer, her business degree apparently making her more valuable than my literature degree ever could. The bookstore became my sanctuary. It was a narrow 3-story building in the Pearl District, with creaky wooden floors and the kind of literary atmosphere that made every customer feel like they were part of something important. The owner, an elderly woman named Iris Coughlin, had inherited the store from her late husband and was looking for someone to eventually take over when she retired. "You have the soul for this place," Iris told me one rainy Thursday evening as we were closing up. Books choose their people, you know? And they've chosen you. I'd been working there for 3 years when Iris made it official. She wanted to sell me the store. The price was fair, a combination of my savings and a loan that felt manageable. For the first time in my life, I had something that was entirely mine. Something Aurelia couldn't touch. Or so I thought. I made the mistake of telling her about the opportunity over dinner at our favorite restaurant, a cozy French bistro where we met every other Tuesday to maintain the fiction that we were close. I was so excited, so proud that I couldn't contain myself. "Iris wants to sell me the bookstore," I said, practically glowing. "Can you believe it? I'll be a business owner. I'll finally have something that's really mine." Aurelia's smile was perfect, supportive, everything a sister's smile should be. "Sophie, that's incredible. You deserve this so much. Tell me everything, the finances, the timeline, all of it." I should have noticed that she asked more questions about the business, details than about my happiness. I should have wondered why she suddenly wanted to know about inventory systems and supplier relationships and profit margins. But I was too thrilled to be suspicious, too grateful for what felt like genuine interest in my life. The next day, Aurelia called Iris. I found out later, much later, exactly what she said in that phone call. How she expressed concerns about my ability to handle such a big responsibility. How she mentioned my history of starting projects and not finishing them. How she suggested that perhaps Iris should consider other options, maybe someone with actual business experience. "I'm just looking out for my sister," Aurelia had said, her voice probably dripping with concerned affection. "I love her so much, but I'd hate to see her fail at something this important." 3 days later, Iris called me into her office. Her demeanor had completely changed where she'd been warm and encouraging before. Now she seemed hesitant almost. Apologetic. "Sophie, I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "And I'm wondering if maybe we should slow down a bit. Take more time to make sure this is the right decision." My heart sank. Did I do something wrong? Did something change? No, nothing like that. It's just ... Well, someone close to you reached out to me. They expressed some concerns about whether you're ready for this kind of responsibility. The betrayal hit me like ice water. Someone close to me. Iris looked uncomfortable. "Your sister. She called because she cares about you, Sophie. She just wanted to make sure we were both thinking this through properly." I felt the world tilt. "What exactly did she say?" "She mentioned that you have a pattern of not following through on big commitments. She was worried that taking on a business might be too much pressure for you." I sat there in stunned silence, processing the magnitude of what Aurelia had done. She hadn't just stolen an opportunity from me, she poisoned it with lies, made it impossible for me to even defend myself without looking delusional. That night, I confronted her. I called her, my hands shaking with rage and heartbreak, and demanded an explanation. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How could you sabotage the one thing I wanted more than anything?" Her response was masterful in its manipulation. "Sophie, I was trying to protect you. You get so excited about things and then you lose interest. Remember your novel? Remember the photography class you quit? I didn't want to see you fail publicly. That's not your decision to make. Of course it is. I'm your sister. I'm your twin. We're supposed to look out for each other. I know you better than anyone sometimes. I know what's best for you better than you. Due to the absolute certainty in her voice was chilling. She genuinely believed she had the right to control my life, to make decisions for me based on her assessment of my capabilities. And because she was my twin, because we'd shared a womb and a childhood and a face, somehow she'd convinced herself that my dreams were also hers to manage. I hung up on her that night, but the damage was done. Iris, spooked by Aurelia's warnings, decided to keep the store after all. I lost not just the opportunity, but also the trust of someone who'd believed in me. Every day at work became a reminder of what I almost had, what had been taken from me by the person who was supposed to love me most, but that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Over the next 2 years, I started to see the pattern more clearly. Every time I shared an aspiration, a plan, a dream with Aurelia, something would go wrong. The literary agent I'd been courting suddenly stopped returning. My calls after Aurelia mentioned she knew someone in publishing. The writing workshop I'd been accepted to mysteriously had a waiting list I was bumped to. The man I'd been dating for 6 months abruptly ended things, claiming he needed space to figure things out. I began to suspect, but suspicion isn't proof. Suspicion is just paranoia wearing a prettier dress. And Aurelia was so good at making me doubt my own perceptions, at making me feel like I was being dramatic or oversensitive or unfairly suspicious of someone who only wanted what was best for me. "You're becoming paranoid, Sophie," she said when I tried to bring up my concerns. "Not everything that goes wrong in your life is my fault. Maybe you need to look at the common denominator here. The common denominator, me, my inadequacy, my inability to succeed, my tendency to blame others for my failures." She trained me so well to doubt myself that even when I could see the pattern, I couldn't trust my own eyes. The breaking point came in the spring of 2023. I'd been working on a new novel for almost 2 years, a different story this time, one I'd been careful not to discuss with anyone, especially Aurelia. It was about a woman who discovers that her entire life has been subtly manipulated by someone close to her, someone who's been pulling strings from the shadows while pretending to care. The irony wasn't lost on me. Through a connection at the bookstore, I'd managed to get the manuscript to a respected literary agent in New York. Her name was Diana Reeves, and she represented exactly the kind of literary fiction I was trying to write. When she requested the full manuscript after reading my first 3 chapters, I was elated but terrified. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents, not my coworkers at the bookstore, and especially not Aurelia. This was mine, this tiny seedling of possibility, and I was going to protect it with everything I had. Dinah called me on a Tuesday morning in April while I was shelving new releases. Her voice was warm but professional as she told me she wanted to represent my book. She thought it had real potential, maybe even award potential. She wanted to set up a call to discuss the next steps. I was so stunned I could barely speak. After years of rejection and self-doubt, someone believed in my work. Someone saw value in the story I'd been afraid to tell. That evening, I broke my own rule. I was so happy, so desperate to share this moment with someone who would understand what it meant, that I called Aurelia. "I got an agent," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "A real agent in New York. She wants to represent my novel." The pause on the other end of the line was just a beat too long. "Sophie, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you. What's the agent's name?" I should have lied. I should have made something up, protected the information that could be used against me. But I was riding too high on success and sisterly affection to think clearly. "Dinah Reeves," I said. "She's with the Morrison Literary Agency? How exciting. I can't wait to hear how this develops. We should celebrate dinner tomorrow night." We made plans to meet at our usual place, and I spent the next 24 hours in a state of euphoric disbelief. I had an agent. I was going to be a published author. After all these years of feeling like a failure, like the twin who couldn't quite measure up, I was finally going to have something that was mine. The celebration dinner was perfect. Aurelia was everything a supportive sister should be: excited, curious, full of questions about the publishing process. She ordered champagne and made a toast to my success. She asked about timelines and potential publishers and marketing strategies. She wanted to know everything, and I told her everything, basking in what felt like genuine pride and love. 2 days later, Dinah Reeves called me again. But this time, her voice was different, cooler, professional in a way that suggested distance. "Sophie, I need to talk to you about your manuscript," she said. "I've received some information that's causing me to reconsider my representation." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of information?" "Someone contacted me claiming to have concerns about the originality of your work. They suggested that significant portions of your novel may have been borrowed from other sources, the world spun." "What?" "That's impossible. Every word of that book is mine. The person who contacted me seemed very knowledgeable about your work and your writing process. They mentioned specific scenes, specific phrases that allegedly appear in other published works." "Who contacted you?" I asked, though I already knew. "I can't reveal that information, but they claimed to be a family member who was concerned about potential legal issues if the book were published as is." Family member. Someone who knew my work intimately, who had access to my writing process, who could speak with authority about my methods and my influences. Someone who loved me enough to be concerned about my legal exposure. "This is sabotage," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Someone is lying to you to destroy my career." Diana's sigh was audible through the phone. "Sophie, I have to protect both of our reputations. Given these concerns, I don't think I can move forward with representation at this time. I'm sorry." She hung up, leaving me standing in my apartment with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone that sounded like the death knell of my dreams. I called Aurelia immediately, tears streaming down my face, desperate for comfort and support from the only person who would understand how devastating this was. "Oh my God, Sophie, that's terrible," she said, her voice full of sympathy. "What did this person tell your agent exactly?" I explained what Dinah had said, how someone had claimed my work wasn't original, how they'd supposedly cited specific examples. "That's so strange," Aurelia mused. "Who would do something like that? Who else knows about your book?" The question hung in the air between us. Who else knew? Who else had I told about Dinah Reeves, about the Morrison Literary Agency, about the specific timeline and details that could be used to contact my agent and plant seeds of doubt? "I don't know," I lied, because the alternative was too horrifying to voice. I really don't know. But I did know. Deep in my bones, in the place where twin intuition lives, I knew exactly who had made that call. I knew who had the knowledge and the access and the twisted love necessary to destroy my dreams while telling themselves they were protecting me. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find proof. I started documenting everything. Every conversation, every interaction, every subtle manipulation I could remember. I began keeping a journal, not of my thoughts and feelings, but of facts and timelines and patterns. I started paying attention to the things I'd been trained to ignore. The red flags I'd been conditioned to dismiss as sisterly love. Took months to build the case, to connect the dots in a way that would be undeniable even to someone as skilled at gaslighting as Aurelia. I had to be patient, had to pretend that nothing had changed between us, had to continue playing the role of the grateful, slightly inadequate sister who needed guidance and protection. The hardest part was the loneliness. I couldn't tell anyone what I was doing because no one would believe me. Who sabotages their own twin? Who destroys the dreams of someone they claim to love? It sounded paranoid, delusional, like the kind of story told by someone who couldn't accept responsibility for their own failures. But I knew the truth. And slowly, carefully, I began to gather the evidence that would prove it. The breakthrough came in November of 2023, almost 8 months after Diana Reeves had dropped me as a client. I was having coffee with Marcus Chen, a guy I'd gone on a few dates with earlier that year before he'd suddenly ghosted me. We ran into each other at Powell's Books, and after some awkward small talk, he surprised me by apologizing. "I owe you an explanation about why I disappeared," he said, stirring his latte nervously. It wasn't fair to just stop calling. I'd assumed he'd simply lost interest, the way people do. But his discomfort suggested something more complicated. "Someone contacted me," he continued. "Someone who claimed to be looking out for you. They told me things about your mental health, about some concerning behaviors you exhibited in past relationships." My heart stopped. What kind of things? Obsessive behaviors, apparently. Stalking, manipulation, emotional instability. "They said they were worried about my safety if I continued seeing you." The coffee cup slipped in my hands. Who was this person? "Your sister. She said she loved you, but that you had a history of becoming dangerously attached to people. She had specific examples, dates, names of other guys you allegedly harassed." Marcus looked genuinely pained as he continued. She was so convincing, so concerned. "She begged me to end things quietly, without confronting you directly, because she was afraid of how you might react. She said she'd seen you become violent before when relationships ended. Violent. The word hung between us like a blade. I never raised my hand to anyone in my life, never even raised my voice in most arguments. But Aurelia had painted me as dangerous, unstable, someone to be feared and avoided. I'm telling you this now because I saw you today and you seem so ... Normal," Marcus said, looking embarrassed. "So sweet and funny, the way you were when we were dating. It made me realize that maybe I'd been lied to. That night, I called in sick to work and spent 12 hours going through every relationship that had ended unexpectedly, every friendship that had cooled without explanation, every opportunity that had slipped through my fingers. I made lists, cross-referenced timelines, and slowly built a comprehensive picture of 20 years of systematic sabotage. The pattern was unmistakable. Every good thing in my life had been quietly poisoned by someone who claimed to love me more than anyone else could. Every time I'd started to build something for myself, a career, a relationship, a friendship, a dream, Aurelia had been there to subtly undermine it while pretending to be supportive. She'd isolated me from romantic partners by painting me as unstable. She'd sabotaged my career opportunities by questioning my competence to authority figures. She'd stolen my creative ideas and made them her own. She'd systematically destroyed my confidence while positioning herself as the only person who truly understood and accepted me. It was brilliant, really. Diabolical and cruel, but brilliant. By the time I realized what was happening, I was so dependent on her validation, so trained to doubt my own perceptions, that I couldn't even trust my own eyes when they showed me the truth. But now I had proof. And more importantly, I had a plan. The plan required patience and precision. I couldn't confront Aurelia directly because she was too skilled at manipulation, too good at turning my words against me. I couldn't go to our parents because they'd never believed that their golden daughter was capable of such calculated cruelty. I couldn't rely on friends because she'd systematically poisoned most of those relationships over the years. But I could do something else. Something that would expose her publicly, undeniably, in a way that couldn't be explained away or reframed as sisterly concern. I started by reaching out to people she'd contacted about me over the years. Marcus had been willing to talk, and through him I found 2 other men she'd scared away with her lies. I tracked down the running workshop coordinator who'd bumped me from the program, the literary agent she'd poisoned against me, even Iris from the bookstore. One by one, I collected their stories. Not to build a legal case, what Aurelia had done wasn't technically illegal, just morally devastating, but to build an undeniable record of her pattern of behavior. The most shocking revelation came from my high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who I'd reached out to on a whim. She remembered me fondly and was happy to catch up. But when I mentioned Aurelia, her tone changed. "Your sister called me years ago. she said carefully. This was maybe 6 or 7 years after you graduated. She said she was worried about you, that you were struggling with some mental health issues and might reach out to former teachers for help. My blood chilled. What kind of help? She said you might ask for references or recommendations, and that I should be cautious about providing them. She claimed you'd been fabricating achievements, exaggerating your academic performance, that sort of thing. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I'd applied for several competitive writing programs over the years, programs that required academic references. I'd always been puzzled by the cool responses I'd received. The way teachers who'd once praised my work seemed hesitant to recommend me. She was very convincing, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. She had specific examples, dates, details about assignments. But talking to you now, you sound nothing like the person she described. I'm starting to wonder if I was misled. By January of 2024, I had enough evidence to bury Aurelia 10 times over. Phone records from the people she'd contacted, email screenshots, detailed timelines that showed her sabotage coinciding with every major opportunity in my life. I had witnesses, documentation, a clear pattern of behavior that no reasonable person could dismiss as coincidence, but I didn't want to bury her privately. I wanted the world to see what she'd done, to understand the depth and calculated nature of her betrayal. I wanted everyone who'd ever doubted me, who'd ever wondered why I couldn't seem to succeed despite my apparent potential, to know the truth. When I discovered revenge treats, I'd been watching YouTube videos about narcissistic abuse, trying to understand the psychology behind what Aurelia had done to me. When I stumbled across this channel that featured stories of people getting revenge on toxic family members, the stories were satisfying in a way that felt healthy, cathartic rather than vindictive. They were about justice, about truth, about people reclaiming their power from those who'd abused it. I knew immediately that this was how I wanted to tell my story. I spent weeks crafting my narrative, making sure every detail was accurate and provable. I wasn't interested in embellishing or exaggerating. The truth was damning enough. I just wanted to lay out the facts in a way that would help other people recognize similar patterns in their own lives. The video I submitted to Revenge Treats was 23 minutes long. I called it, "My Twin Sister Systematically Destroyed My Life While Pretending to Love Me." In it, I calmly, methodically laid out 20 years of evidence. I showed the timelines, read from the documented conversations, explained the psychological manipulation tactics Aurelia had used. I didn't scream or cry or call her names. I just told the truth, completely and undeniably. I let the facts speak for themselves. The video went viral. Within 48 hours, it had over 2 million views. The comments section was filled with people sharing similar stories, recognizing their own experiences in mine. Mental health professionals weighed in, explaining the psychology behind this kind of systematic abuse. Other twins reached out, both to share their own stories of sibling sabotage and to express amazement at the calculated nature of what Aurelia had done. But the real impact came from the people who knew us. Marcus Chun shared the video on his social media with a caption about the importance of verifying information before cutting people out of your life. Mrs. Rodriguez reached out to apologize and offer to provide belated recommendations for any opportunities I was pursuing. The writing workshop coordinator contacted me to say I could join the next session free of charge. Diana Reeves called me personally. "Sophie, I owe you an enormous apology," she said, her voice thick with regret. "I watched your video and I've been thinking about that phone call I received about your work. The person who contacted me knew so many intimate details about your writing process, about your personal life. I assumed they were credible because they claimed to be family." She paused and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. "I'd like to read your manuscript again if you're willing to share it. I made a terrible mistake and I'd like the chance to make it right." But the most devastating response came from someone I hadn't expected. Our father called me 3 days after the video went live. His voice was quiet, strained, like he'd aged years in the space of hours. "Sophie, your mother and I watched your video," he said. We've been up all night talking, trying to process what you've revealed. I braced myself for denial, for them to take Aurelia's side, to dismiss my story as the delusions of a jealous sister. Instead, my father said something. That broke my heart and healed it simultaneously. We believe you. And we're so sorry we didn't see it sooner. He explained that they'd always wondered about the discrepancies in my life, the way opportunities seemed to slip away just when things were looking promising. They'd attributed it to bad luck, to my being unlucky in timing. They'd never considered that someone might be actively sabotaging me, especially not Aurelia. She was always so concerned about you, he said, his voice hollow with realization. Always bringing up her worries about your stability, your follow-through, your ability to handle pressure. We thought she was being a caring sister. We didn't realize she was poisoning our perception of you. My mother got on the phone then, crying openly. We failed you, sweetheart, she said. We let her convince us that you needed protecting when what you really needed was for us to protect you from her. The conversation lasted 3 hours. They told me about incidents over the years that made sense now in light of what I'd revealed. Times when Aurelia had expressed concerns about my mental health, my decision-making, my reliability. Times when she'd subtly suggested that I might not be ready for certain opportunities or responsibilities. She was so convincing, my mother said. And we wanted to believe her because the alternative that one of our daughters was systematically destroying the other was too horrible to contemplate. 2 weeks after the video went live, Aurelia finally contacted me. She didn't call she couldn't risk having her voice recorded. Instead, she sent a carefully crafted email that was a masterpiece of manipulation, disguised as an apology. Sophie, it began, I've watched your video and I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for any pain I've caused you. It was never my intention to hurt you. Everything I did came from a place of love and concern. Perhaps I was overprotective. Perhaps I made mistakes in judgment. But I hope you can understand that I was only trying to look out for you the way I thought a sister should. I know you're angry with me now and I accept that. But I hope someday you can forgive me and we can rebuild our relationship. You're my twin, my other half, and losing you would be like losing a part of myself. I love you and I always will. Aurelia. The email was perfect in its calculated manipulation. She acknowledged causing pain without admitting to any specific wrongdoing. She reframed her sabotage as overprotection and mistakes in judgment rather than deliberate destruction. She positioned herself as the victim of my anger rather than the perpetrator of systematic abuse. But most tellingly, she ended with emotional blackmail, the suggestion that we were cosmically connected. That my refusal to forgive her was somehow unnatural and wrong. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The aftermath of going public was both more and less dramatic than I'd expected. More dramatic because the response was so overwhelming. Because so many people reached out to share their own stories of family sabotage and manipulation. Less dramatic because, in the end, the truth was just the truth. It didn't require my defense or explanation. It spoke for itself. Aurelia tried to control the narrative, of course. She made her own social media posts about the pain of being misunderstood by someone she loved. She shared old photos of us together, with captions about the complexity of sibling relationships and the importance of forgiveness. She even suggested that I was having a mental health crisis and that the family was getting me help. But it was too late. Too many people had corroborated my story, provided their own evidence of her manipulation. The pattern was too clear, too documented, too undeniable for her usual tactics to work. She lost friends, professional opportunities, social standing. People began to see her differently, to question interactions they'd had with her in the past. The golden daughter facade cracked, revealing the calculating manipulator underneath. I wish I could say I felt satisfied by her downfall, but mostly I just felt tired. Relieved, but tired. 20 years of gaslighting doesn't disappear overnight. And learning to trust my own perceptions again was harder than I'd expected. But there were victories too. Real, meaningful victories. Dinah Reeves did read my manuscript again, and she did offer to represent me. My novel, the one about systematic manipulation and psychological abuse, sold to a major publisher in a 2-book deal. It's being released next month, and the early reviews have been incredible. I left the bookstore and started my own literary consulting business, helping other writers navigate the publishing industry. The business has grown faster than I ever imagined, fueled partly by the connections I made through my viral video, but mostly by word of mouth from satisfied clients. I've been dating someone new, a thoughtful, kind man named David who knew my story before we met and has been nothing but supportive of my healing process. When I told him I was nervous about introducing him to my family, he said something that made me cry. "I'm not dating your family, Sophie. I'm dating you, and you're more than enough." Most importantly, I've started to remember who I am when I'm not constantly doubting myself. I'm funny, it turns out. I'm creative and insightful and capable of making good decisions. I'm not the anxious, uncertain person Aurelia trained me to believe I was. I'm someone with opinions and dreams and the ability to make them happen. Relationship with my parents is healing slowly. They've both started therapy to work through their guilt and to learn how to support me without the filter of Aurelia's manipulation. It's awkward sometimes, rebuilding trust that was undermined so gradually I didn't even notice it happening. But they're trying, genuinely trying, and that means everything is for Aurelia. I honestly don't know what she's doing now. I've blocked her on all social media, changed my phone number, and asked my parents not to share information about her with me. I'm not interested in her attempts at reconciliation or her efforts to rebuild her reputation. I'm not interested in whether she's learned from this experience or whether she's found new people to manipulate. I'm interested in my own life, finally. In the books I want to write, the relationships I want to build, the dreams I want to pursue, without someone quietly sabotaging them from the shadows. Sometimes people ask me if I miss her, if I regret losing my twin. The question always surprises me because it assumes I had something to lose. But you can't lose something you never really had. The sister I thought I had loving, supportive, protective never existed. She was a carefully constructed facade, designed to hide someone who saw me not as a person to love, but as a threat to eliminate. I don't miss the facade. I don't miss walking on eggshells, constantly second-guessing myself, apologizing for taking up space in my own life. I don't miss being small and grateful and perpetually inadequate. I miss the sister I thought I had. But I've grieved her the way you grieve someone who dies. Because in a sense, she did die, or rather, I finally accepted that she'd never been alive to begin with. The video I made for Revenge Treats has been viewed over 10 million times now. The comment section has become a support group for people dealing with similar situations, narcissistic siblings, manipulative family members, systematic campaigns of psychological destruction disguised as love. Reading those comments is both heartbreaking and healing. Heartbreaking because so many people have experienced similar betrayals. Healing because it reminds me that I'm not alone in this experience. That recognizing abuse for what it is, even when it comes from family, even when it's wrapped in concern. And love is an act of strength rather than betrayal. I've learned that the most insidious form of abuse is the kind that masquerades as protection. When someone systematically destroys your opportunities while claiming they're saving you from failure. When they isolate you from others while insisting they're the only one who truly understands you. When they undermine your confidence while positioning themselves as your greatest supporter, that's not love. That's control wearing love's mask. The hardest part of healing has been learning to trust my own judgment again. For so long, Aurelia's voice had been louder in my head than my own. When opportunities arose, I'd hear her warnings about my tendency to bite off more than I could chew. When I felt excited about something, her concerns about my pattern of not following through would dampen my enthusiasm. When people showed interest in me, her subtle suggestions about my instability would make me question whether I deserved their attention. Reclaiming my own voice, learning to distinguish between legitimate self-reflection and internalized manipulation, has been like archaeological work. I've had to carefully excavate my authentic thoughts and feelings from layers of someone else's narrative about who I was supposed to be. Therapy has helped enormously. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Kim, specializes in family trauma and was one of the first people to use the term psychological warfare to describe what Aurelia had done to me. What your sister did wasn't impulsive or emotional, she explained during one of our early sessions. It was calculated, systematic, and designed to achieve specific outcomes. She wanted to keep you dependent on her validation while ensuring you never succeeded enough to outshine her or gain the confidence to question her behavior. Dr. Kim helped me understand that twins can be particularly vulnerable to this kind of abuse because the expectation of closeness makes it easier to justify invasive behavior. When someone shares your face, your birthday, your family history, it can feel natural to let them make decisions about your life. The boundaries that would be obvious with anyone else become blurred. She trained you to see her interference as love, Dr. Kim said. That's why it took you so long to recognize what was happening. She didn't just sabotage your opportunities, she sabotaged your ability to trust your own perceptions of her sabotage. The breakthrough in my healing came about 6 months after the video went viral. I was having dinner with my parents, one of our new monthly meetings designed to rebuild our relationship, when my mother said something that stopped me in my tracks. You know, Sophie, watching you these past few months has been like watching you come back to life, she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. You're so much more confident, so much more yourself. I didn't realize how subdued you become over the years. My father nodded. It's like you've been holding your breath for 20 years and finally exhaled. That night, I looked at recent photos of myself and compared them to pictures from the past few years. The difference was startling. In the older photos, I looked tired, uncertain, like I was apologizing for taking up space in the frame. In the recent ones, I looked alive, present, like I had every right to be exactly where I was. The publishing world embraced my story in ways I never could have imagined. Not just my novel, but my actual story of surviving systematic abuse. I've been invited to speak at conferences about family trauma, about recognizing manipulation in close relationships, about the particular challenges twins face in establishing individual identities. The most meaningful invitation came from Reed College, our old school, asking me to speak to their literature students about perseverance in the face of setbacks. Standing in that familiar auditorium, looking out at young writers who reminded me so much of my younger self, I felt the full circle of my journey. The most important thing I can tell you, I said to those eager faces, is to trust your own voice. There will always be people who claim to know what's best for you, who say they're protecting you from disappointment or failure. But your dreams belong to you. Your talents belong to you. Your right to try and fail and try again belongs to you. After the talk, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. My older brother keeps telling me I'm not good enough to be a serious writer, she said. He says he's being realistic, helping me avoid disappointment. But listening to you, I think maybe he's just afraid I might actually succeed. I gave her my business card and told her to call me if she ever needed someone to remind her that her voice mattered. Because that's what I wish I'd had during all those years of doubt, someone who saw my potential clearly, without the filter of someone else's agenda. The success of my novel has been surreal. The Mirror's Edge, the title, came to me in a dream. About looking at your reflection and seeing someone else's face looking back has been on the bestseller list for 3 months now. The reviews have praised not just the writing, but the psychological authenticity of the manipulation depicted. In the story, Blackwood has written a chilling portrait of abuse that hides in plain sight, wrote the Times reviewer. Her protagonist's journey from victim to survivor is both harrowing and ultimately triumphant, a reminder that the most dangerous predators are often those who claim to love us most. My editor wants to fast-track the second book, which I'm writing. Now it's about healing, about learning to trust yourself again after years of gaslighting, about the messy, nonlinear process of reclaiming your own life. I'm calling it Breaking the Echo, because for so long I could only hear my own thoughts. As an echo of someone else's voice, David has been incredible throughout this entire journey. He's never tried to fix me or rush my healing process. When I have bad days, when the old self-doubt creeps in, he doesn't dismiss my feelings or try to logic them away. He just reminds me that healing isn't linear and that I'm stronger than I realize. You survived 20 years of someone actively working against your success. He said to me recently when I was struggling with imposter syndrome about my book's success, you not only survived it, you exposed it, you healed from it, and you're helping other people recognize it in their own lives. That's not luck, Sophie, that's strength. We're talking about moving in together, which feels like both a natural next step and a terrifying leap. I'm still learning how to be in a relationship where the other person genuinely wants what's best for me, where support doesn't come with hidden conditions or ulterior motives. I'm not used to someone being on my side without wanting something in return. I told him during one of our long talks about the future. That's not your failing, he replied. That's the trauma of having someone who should have been unconditionally on your side turn you into their competition instead. The hardest question people ask me is whether I think Aurelia will ever change, whether she's capable of recognizing the damage she's done and making amends. The honest answer is that I don't know and I don't care. Not because I'm heartless, but because I've learned that my healing doesn't depend on her acknowledgement or her growth. For too many years, my emotional well-being was tied to her approval, her validation, her version of who I was supposed to be. I can't make the mistake of tying my peace to her redemption. Whether she learns from this experience or finds new people to manipulate is between her and her conscience. My job is to continue building the life she tried to prevent me from having. What a life it's becoming. I wake up each morning excited about my work, confident in my decisions, surrounded by people who see me clearly and love me authentically. I write without hearing her voice questioning my talent. I pursue opportunities without her warnings echoing in my head. I trust my instincts without her concerns undermining my confidence. Sometimes, I catch myself marveling at simple things making a decision without second-guessing myself, expressing an opinion without immediately wondering if I'm wrong, feeling excited about something without waiting for someone to point out all the ways it could go badly. These might seem like small victories, but they feel revolutionary to me. The community that's grown around my story has been one of the most unexpected gifts of this whole experience. Through revenge treats and my own social media presence, I've connected with hundreds of people who've survived similar experiences. We share resources, celebrate each other's victories, and provide support during the difficult moments of healing. One woman reached out to tell me that my video helped her recognize that her identical twin had been sabotaging her romantic relationships for years. Another shared how she'd finally understood why every job opportunity seemed to fall through after she discussed it with her supportive older sister. A man wrote to say that watching my story helped him see the pattern of undermining behavior from his twin brother, whom he'd always trusted completely. The most heartbreaking messages come from people who are still in the thick of it, still being systematically undermined by someone they love. They recognize the patterns but struggle to believe their own perceptions, struggle to imagine a life without their abuser's presence taught to them. I always say the same thing: trust yourself. Your instincts aren't wrong. Your perceptions aren't flawed. If something feels off, if someone's help consistently makes your life worse, if you find yourself constantly doubting your own competence despite evidence to the contrary, pay attention to that feeling. The people who truly love you want to see you succeed, even if that success means you need them less. The people who truly support you don't need to tear down your confidence to build up their own importance in your life. Real love celebrates your victories without reservation. Real support doesn't come with strings attached. I'm often asked what I would say to Aurelia if I saw her today. The answer is nothing. There's nothing left to say. I've said everything I needed to say in that video, and the world heard it. I don't need her acknowledgement of the truth, her apology for the damage, or her explanation for her behavior. I don't need closure from her because I found closure within myself. The sister relationship I thought I wanted built on mutual support and genuine love I found with other women in my life. My friend Zira from my writing group, who celebrates every small victory in my career as if it were her own. My neighbor Elena, who checks in on me during difficult days without trying to fix or manage my feelings. My editor Claire, who believes in my work and pushes me to be better without undermining my confidence. These are the relationships I was meant to have all along, connections based on authenticity rather than control. Support rather than sabotage. Love rather than possession. As I write this, almost a year has passed since I first spoke my truth publicly. My second book is nearly finished. My relationship with David is deepening, and my business is thriving. I have speaking engagements booked through next year, a literary agent who actually advocates for me, and parents who see me clearly for the first time in decades. More importantly, I have myself back. The self that Aurelia tried so hard to diminish, to control, to ultimately erase. I have my voice, my dreams, my right to take up space in the world without apologizing for it. People sometimes express sympathy for the loss of my twin relationship, as if surviving abuse is somehow lesser because it cost me a family connection. But I didn't lose a relationship, I escaped one. I didn't sacrifice love. I discovered what love actually looks like when it's not twisted into a weapon of control. The real tragedy isn't that. I don't speak to Aurelia anymore. The real tragedy is that I spent 30 years not speaking to myself, not trusting my own voice, not believing I deserved the good things I was capable of creating. But that tragedy has ended. I'm speaking now loudly and clearly. I'm trusting myself, believing in myself, creating the life I was always meant to have. And no one, not even someone who shares my face and my history, can take that away from me ever again. The most beautiful part of this whole journey has been discovering that I'm not half of anything. I'm not the responsible twin, the steady twin, the twin who needs protecting. I'm not defined by my relationship to someone else or by their assessment of my capabilities. I'm Sophie Marina Blackwood. I'm a published author, a successful businesswoman, a loyal friend, a loving partner. I'm someone who survived 2 decades of psychological warfare, came out stronger, clearer, more authentically myself than ever before. And that's not revenge, that's resurrection. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. I know it was long, but some truths can't be rushed or simplified. If any part of this resonated with you, if you've experienced similar manipulation or sabotage from someone who claimed to love you, I want you to know that you're not alone and you're not crazy. Trust your instincts. Document the patterns. Find people who celebrate your success without reservation. And remember that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is refusing to accept treatment that diminishes your light. Drop a comment below if you've ever had to cut ties with toxic family members to save yourself. Your story matters, and sharing it might help someone else recognize they deserve better too.